It has been a long time since Stasis was a focus for Destiny 2. In fact, it has received nerfs, even in its position as the least beloved element. For many reasons, the subclass is focused on crowd control, with very little emphasis on damage itself. The subclass pickups require you to use a specific aspect to use it, and it has limited ability choice, no buffing keywords in relation to stasis, very long cooldowns, and nerfs from 2 years ago, and also just basic power creep. In this video, I will not be addressing some of these, namely the limited ability choice, but I may do that in a future video if you're all interested in that. I just want to jump in real quick. This script was mostly written before the announcement that Season 23 would have a large focus on Stasis. That being said, this is more focused on foundational issues and, just a Stasis enjoyer's copium that likely will not be addressed next season. Anyways, back to the main part of the video. That being said, what will we focus on? Stasis Shards, a player benefiting keyword, cooldowns, and just a little bit of that power creep. And I'm not going much into damage. Basically, the damage issues partially result from the lack of damaging abilities. Of course, some specific things could use damage buffs, like melees specifically. Stasis cooldowns are just longer. There's next to no reason for this, and no reason for that tip to be highlighted by the stats. Across the board, cooldowns can be reduced. They should be longer than light subclasses now, but those abilities should also probably get a cooldown nerf, if we're being honest here. Stasis is almost purely focused on making your enemies have less fun. So how about we make it buff ourselves and possibly our allies in some way? So I'm proposing a buff. I call it Jagged or Jagged Will. Hear me out. If Stasis is meant to be the dark manifestation of control and willpower, we are effectively making things freeze and slow because we have a stronger willpower and overpower them, controlling their movement. If we can impose our will on others, what is stopping us from using our willpower to protect our mind and body? Jagged essentially is just thorns from any other game you've played. If that doesn't make sense to you, basically, if you get hit, the things around you get hit too, for less damage. This buff would provide you with an overshield with little to no damage resistance, but at certain intervals, let's say every 20% of that overshield, you release a pulse that damages and slows enemies. Incoming melee damage will always initiate a pulse. Outgoing melee damage is buffed a small amount. If a Jagged overshield is completely broken within a short time frame, then you deal shatter damage to nearby enemies. In my opinion, Jagged's main purpose would be to give Stasis subclasses a way to play more aggressively and a way to support your teammates more, along with bringing Icefall Mantles up in power. If you receive Jagged and buffed the Jagged effect. If we introduce a new buff, we should give it some aspects and fragments, right? Well, if we already need to adjust aspects to make room for Stasis Shard generation, I think it's a good time to get to aspects. So now let's talk about the need of an aspect to make Stasis Shards. Currently, each of the 3 classes have different ways to make shards. Why don't we just give everyone the ability to make shards through all 3 methods, but with lower chances? Just spitballing some numbers here. Breaking a crystal has the highest chance, maybe a 75 to 90% chance depending on the crystal size. Defeating combatant with a stasis debuff applied to it, somewhere from 65 to 100%, just depending on the level of combatant. Guardians would be like 75%. If they're in super, 100. Champs maybe 80. Ultras would be a 100% chance. And finally, if you freeze an opponent, you can make a Stasis Shard. Red bars would be like 25% chance, ultras would be 100% chance, with everything else kind of in the middle there. Of course, keep in mind these numbers are just made up, and they're probably really bad. Okay, these could all probably be lowered. Maybe a limit on shards created before a short cooldown would help. I think it's important to keep in mind that ionic traces also respond in very high amounts and very easily with like no cooldown. So maybe we get away with that with Stasis Shards if they all only have percentage chances, and taking on stronger enemies and larger crystals gives you a higher chance. I think it should be fine, but we might lower all these numbers across the board just a little bit. In order to give shards to basic stasis gameplay, we needed to remove 3 aspects, so we should make 3 more. And I'm going to start with Warlocks, that's my main class. Warlocks will get a heavy melee. If you melee while sliding, you crush your stasis staff in your hand, sending a shattering pulse that shatters combatants and stasis crystals. Crystals and enemies shattered this way will grant Jagged. This would finally give Warlocks a shatter option other than just shoot it with your gun. And by playing aggressively, you're rewarded with a safety net. Of course, larger crystals and higher tier enemies will grant more of that Jagged buff. Titans being behemoths, they should be tanky and aggressive, so let's support that idea. Melee final blows and stasis shards will grant you Jagged. Your barricade deals more damage, and standing near it grants you and your allies Jagged. Improved melee damage while Jagged. Basically, this is Bastion from the Void Titan, but on stasis and made to fit that identity a little bit better. Revenant Hunters are next, and basically they're ice ninjas that focus on disorienting their foes. Well, hunters generally have very few ways to support their allies. To achieve this quickly, let's just think about ice and the most annoying things about it. It's slick. But if you're skilled enough, you can glide on the ice, moving faster than walking. You know, like ice skating? So how about hunters leave an icy path behind them as they slide, consuming 50% of a melee charge? You would need to have a charge to make the path, but allies would move faster on it and have increased reload speed. Enemies would be slowed. With 50% melee charge, you can make 3 paths behind you due to having 2 melee charges basically. And if you're using, let's say, Stompies, you make a longer ice path. Of course, if you use Gambler's Dodge, that's another path really quickly. Honestly, this aspect would probably be 3 fragment slots, but it could be very unique within the Hunter's kit. Now that we have a new buff and new aspects, we should probably look at the fragments to see how they could be improved to fit the new buff. Let's start with Whisper of Fractures. While melee energy is cool, adding Jagged to charge melee final blows would help it out as a small addition to it. Whisper of Rhyme gives you a small amount of Jagged. Instead of just a small amount of overshield, it'd be a Jagged overshield. Maybe change a Whisper of Chains that allows you to gain Jagged from nearby shatters. Also, let's be honest, Whisper of Hunger should not reduce 2 stats. Maybe just make it only reduce strength. Anyways, that's going to be about it for this video. Please tell me your thoughts down below, and if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out that pinned comment down below and tell me if you guys want a stasis, maybe even a strand ability video, like ability concepts for more grenades, more melees, more supers, and maybe I'll do it. Just let me know. Anyways, I'll see ya.